So today I'd like to show you some of the process for coloring here. And I just have a mandala design here. I did create this design myself, so I might be sharing that with you later. But for now, we're just going to focus on the coloring. And so for this kind of coloring, I do have kind of a 3-step process. And I'll show you parts of this so that you can see how I do that. And so the gist of it, before we even get started, I'll show you what the the process is. I just start with an alcohol marker, so that's what we're going to use first, and then I follow that up with some colored pencil, and then I finish it off with some of this charcoal white. I will also show you some alternatives in case you really just can't get the charcoal white to work properly for you. I'll also give you some tips for using this in case you find that this isn't working for you yet. So how about we just get started? Okay, so here you can see that I already have a little bit going here. So just the center of this mandala. So how about we start by adding some color into this next region? I think I'm going to go with this really nice kind of light violet color. Let's see how that looks. And so my first piece of advice, if you're going to try out this kind of system, I would advise you to select colors that aren't too deep. So if you find a purple that you like, if it's really dark purple, maybe try to grab one that's a little lighter, because earlier I did have one that was just gorgeous deep purple, but I think it was too deep. Especially when you're first practicing just doing something like this, you want to steer away from those deeper colors. So here I'm using this color. It's not super light. I think the colors that I like the most are pastels. So I think I just have a tendency to use those pastel markers the most out of my set. So here, I'm just kind of slowly working my way around. As you can see, this is a much easier way to color. It is really nice to use color pencils and other things like that, but it takes a while. And sometimes we just kind of want to have fun. So using markers, just like this, just working our way pretty quickly around the page. And as you can see, I'm not bothering to color each little petal separately. I'm just taking the entire region here, this whole shape, and all of it gets that one color. I have noticed that oftentimes a lot of folks like to actually take a different color and color in every single piece, and that's fine if you like to do that. I just don't really do that. I consider each of these, this whole thing, that's all one shape, and so I want it to have a base color. Even if I decide to add different colors in the petals later, I'm still letting them kind of be more cohesive by giving them that same foundation. So that's why I'm doing this here. So here we just have one more left. Okay, so that's pretty good. Okay, so there we have all of these little shapes that are kind of going around the center. If I wanted to, I could also jump in here and kind of add some color to these little ones, but I'm going to leave that for later since that's kind of self-explanatory. So this is the color that I have. So because this is kind of like a violet color, I'm going to now choose some colors that are deeper. So now is when I will actually go for hopefully a deeper purple. We'll see how this looks. I'm going to see if I can grab another one. Maybe even a blue might work here. So just something that's deeper than what I already have. And so all I'm essentially doing with this is I am going to use the color pencil to create slight shadows on the drawing. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Let's see how this looks. I'm going to try this blue one out a little first. So I'm just using it kind of where there's this tiny little peak on the inside, and so I'm just adding this to create a slight shadow. I think that looks pretty nice. I like that. And let me try to zoom in a little bit, since I know that that is very, very tiny. There we go. That should be a little better. And so what I'm just doing here is I'm taking my colored pencil and just very gently coloring over that, creating a bit of a shadow right here. And of course, this gets harder if the shapes are tiny. So if you really like to color tiny, tiny, tiny drawings, this might feel and look a little different for you, but these are kind of part way. They're not the tiniest. They're a little small, but not the tiniest. So here I'm just, you'll notice I'm not being super careful. Just kind of enjoying laying down some color here. And then just doing my best to trying to do a little bit of a gradient. Just like that. And then I'll just work my way around. This doesn't require a super delicate hand. And as you can see, you can kind of just cover over an entire little region like that. So like right here, I just go over the whole thing like that. And the nice thing about this is that there isn't any white underneath. Like it is still going to look slightly grainy, but not as grainy as it would if you were simply coloring directly over just the paper. So what I want to show you right now is how do I go on to the next step. So we've already used the marker and we've used the colored pencil. And now I'm going to use a little tiny bit of this charcoal pencil. So it's white charcoal pencil. So I'm just going to use this to create some of those little highlights. And again, this is such a tiny, tiny detail. You can totally omit this, but I feel that just adding that tiny bit there really helps. So I'm going to put just a little bit here. And I might even add some to the others, just a tiny bit. So just a little flick. Something like that. And then a good idea is to use a tiny bit of a blending stump. And I don't think I have the blending stump I want. So in lieu of a blending stump, you can always use a Q-tip, so a cotton swab. And just soften that up a tiny bit. Now as far as the tips for using this, I will warn you that when you are using that white charcoal, you cannot place it on top of where there is colored pencil. The colored pencil has a different feel to it. It is a little sort of waxy or oily, and you can't really put this chalky material on top of that. So make sure that you're only using it where it's pretty much just the paper, because the alcohol ink doesn't affect the paper. So let me show you one more time. I'm just going to add some here. Let's see if I can be a little more... I haven't even put the blue here. So I just want you to see how it looks if you decide not to do the color pencil part. So just added these little bits there. And then I'm just going to soften them here with this cotton swab. So you can see it still also creates a little bit of a variation. Now if you don't like the way the white kind of laid over any of that, this is where you can have fun and come in and use maybe a pen to reestablish some of those lines if you want to. So this is where it's up to you. How much do you want to do? And how far would you like to go? So here I'm just kind of reestablishing those black lines, since the white kind of blurred them a little. Or you can just leave them the way they are. Lots of good stuff to do. And again, I will make sure to link everything in the description. I really do appreciate when you take the links that I have there, because I do get a slight commission from them, but that's always really nice. So thank you for that. So there we go. That's what it looks like. So we can reestablish the lines and just have a little bit of a highlight there. And that is essentially what I did here on this one. So I'm going to show you what I would do with this shape right here. So again, some people will have the tendency to try to color each one of these in a different color, and that is fun. If you want to have a fun, great time, you can absolutely do that. I'm just going to show you my tendency of how it is that I color these things. So I'm going to do, let me try again. I can't remember what color this is. Okay, that's pretty good. It's kind of a mustard color. So again, I'm going to take this entire shape and just fill it with the alcohol ink. It's a bit of a mustardy color. I'm just going to fill it, the whole thing. Just like that. So there we go. Because alcohol ink is very forgiving, so that's pretty nice. Now I want to select a colored pencil that kind of matches this. I'm thinking of going for a green. So let's see if I can find that. And preferably the green that I choose should be a deeper green. So let's see here. I have a few colors. Quite a few colors. So let's see if we can find one that I might be okay with. This one looks like it's an artichoke color, but it might not be deep enough. So again, I'm just sharing with you how I kind of... This one's way too similar. This is kind of my thought process as I'm picking through my pencils. I think this one, it says it's a dark green. That might be good. Olive green might fit really nicely. Oh, I think I like this one the most. Okay, this happens to be a Prismacolor pencil. That is one of my other brands that I'm fairly fond of. So this is a Prismacolor. I believe this is a... It's either a Premier or a Prismacolor Scholar. So, in case you're interested, again, I'll make sure to provide the links. So for this little shape here, I'm just going to do as I did before. And I'm going to take my colored pencil and kind of go around these little edges here where I know that I want it to be just a little darker. So I'm just going around the edges. Very softly. Do your best to create the kind of gradients that you like. So right here I'm going to allow a gradient right there. And then I'll just go around this edge. So you'll notice this is just creating a really soft kind of shadow around the edge. Doesn't have to get too complicated. Even if you're just working with just a simple circle, a little orb, you can do this too. It's going to give a nice little effect. And just kind of try it out, just see where you're putting things and how they look. Don't be afraid to experiment and to just try things out. So here it is. Not terribly precise. It's a little messy in a few places, so that's acceptable though. I'm actually going to erase this just a little. Kind of accidentally made some... And you can always do this as well. I have this pencil eraser. So this one in particular, this is a Faber-Castell Perfection 758B. This one erases color pencil pretty nicely because it's just slightly gritty. So I like to use this when I'm doing this portion. So there we go. If you need just a little more going on here, which I usually do, I'll take a black pencil. This is my Blick Studio pencil. And I just add a bit of a deeper shadow right here. Just some black. Layer it on. So just like that. If you want to, go ahead and do some blending. But I'm not going to do any blending because I already have in mind that I'm going to be using the white charcoal pencil. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that area right in the middle along this whole shape as it curves around, right down the middle, and I'm going to create a slight highlight there. So again, make sure you're doing this only where there's alcohol ink and not where you use the color pencil. And I suppose I should add right now that something that might be interfering with your use of this white charcoal pencil, there are a couple of things that I can think of that I know I've had trouble with in the past. So if you're finding that you're having trouble laying down this gorgeous white line, there are a couple of things. It could be your paper is too smooth, so maybe consider changing that. This paper that I'm using is a bit textured, and so I'll give you the link so you can take a look at that. The next thing is the pencil itself, unfortunately, here on the tip, it is supposed to be charcoal, but there's also a binder in there. There is a something that they put in there to make sure it stays together as a stick and it doesn't break too much. So you may actually be encountering a little chunk of that binder and you'll feel it. If you put your nail to it, it'll feel different. So what you might want to actually do is snap that piece off, sharpen your pencil again, and see if you can reach a fresh spot in the pencil. So that's unfortunate. It's kind of an error when it was made. It's nothing that, you could have foreseen, but I've noticed that that happens sometimes. So that's particularly why I like to buy this pencil, because the General's brand gives me the least trouble with that. Any other brands, I find that there's binder in them often that's kind of does that. So that's something you can do. And then, let's see here. Of course, the final problem is, I already talked about there being color pencil, so obviously don't do this on top of color pencil. The last problem, though, is if your paper is still wet. So let's say you used, instead of these alcohol markers, so I use some nice alcohol markers. They dry up fairly quickly, but let's say you decided to use something like, let's say instead of that, you happen to have some of these watercolor pens, some of these water-based pens, like these Arteza ones, and you find that they lay down more water. It could simply be that the area that you colored is still too wet. So I would recommend either take a little heat gun or something and dry it off, or just give it a few minutes to dry off, and then you should be able to start using your white charcoal. So as you can see, it gives some good little depth, and the steps are fairly simple. You don't have to be too delicate. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to off camera take a little bit of time and just kind of complete this. But I just wanted to give you the chance to see kind of what happens as we follow these steps. So again, you start off with marker to give yourself just that foundational color. You follow it up with some pencil to give yourself some shadows. And then you finish off by making highlights. Believe it or not, this is part of your standard kind of color foundations. When you're doing things, you want to have your mid-tone, you want to have a shadow, and you want to have highlights. So that's what we're creating using this 3-step system. So hopefully you give that a try. Go and find some of your coloring books, your coloring pages, and see what you can do with that. If not, you can always download some of my free coloring pages from my site, which is also linked in the description. And so I hope you have fun with that, and please enjoy. And if you would like something else to view, go ahead and select this video. I hope you enjoy it, and please have a good day.